Hi, I'm Judith. I'm a Canadian and I'm over 80. Today, I'm going to talk about messes. So I'm going to plunge right into it. Last video, I gave you kind of a map of a way in which you could assess your life. I didn't actually say assess your life this way in the happiness, but I was talking about how I think about things, and this is kind of a context diagram for it, where you can have the positive or the negative. And at the negative, you have things that are out of order, and then messes. Messes are the bottom level. And at the top, you can have success, which is your top level, or you can have things that are in order. They're okay. They're getting by. No big problems. And I suggested that then there were various categories, and your categories may differ from mine, but various categories in which you could keep your life moving. And this is a way to map your happiness. I call it the happiness map in the last video, because the things that are negative will, to some extent, you can all tolerate a certain amount of disorder, but they'll, to some extent, they can, in some cases, really make you not very happy. They just take the edge off happiness a little bit if they're not too bad. Messes can really derail your life in a big way, or they can stay centered in some area of your life. So I'm going to talk today about messes and what you do about messes in your life. The idea of this being that if you can get rid of those big negatives in your life, so I had to bend down to put my slipper back on my heel. If you can get rid of the big messes in your life, you will eliminate a source of unhappiness, and therefore you spend more time in the positive zone, and therefore you're happier, more content, and you have more time to focus on moving some things maybe up from disorder to order or from order to success. So let's talk about messes. So I'm going to start with the worst kinds of messes, which are likely beyond my ability to help you with. But I can at least point them out and point out what I think needs to be done about them. Big messes are messes that get you in trouble with the law. They are messes that invade many areas of your life. They cross over. They're not usually confined to one area of your life. They may not have anything to do with legal stuff. They may not be illegal, but they may involve diseases or disorders. I'm not talking about what I call disorder in your life, but actual disorders, mental disorders, mental illness, physical illness, other kinds of areas that are just so complex that they disarrange your life in really major ways. And here I'm not talking about. It just occurred to me that when I said about physical illnesses, I'm not talking about. When I talk about messes, I'm talking about things that you could actually do something about. There are some, if you get a diagnosis of terminal illness, I don't consider that that's a mess. It's certainly a problem that you need to deal with. It's certainly something you have to adjust to or accept or deal with. But it isn't a mess because you likely at that point don't have any hope of actually, you have to come to terms with it and deal with it, but you don't have any hopes of actually straightening it out. So your challenge then is to find what solace and happiness you can within that time frame that you have, or yeah, I guess. So I'm not talking about that, but I am talking about messes that can be quite big. A couple of them I mentioned in other videos. One I mentioned in a video, and I don't remember which one it was, but I talked about a woman in my hometown, the town that I live in now, that parked herself in a car for a couple of years out in a country road. And she didn't get out of that car except to go into the woods to use the woods as a toilet facility. People brought her gas. People brought her food. She read, people brought her newspapers, and she read newspapers a lot. She just sat in the car behind the steering wheel reading day after day, season after season. And I would help her out from time to time. But honestly, I realized that it was kind of She wouldn't accept any. I mean, she would accept food or gas, but she wouldn't accept any help to do her laundry, to um, take her into town for a warm night. I guess because she didn't necessarily trust me, or what I was offering. But there was just no way out, no way for that situation to get better unless she somehow got help. Now, eventually, she wasn't there anymore, and I did see her in a place that offered meals to people in need. And so I don't know what her situation was, what got her out of there, and what situation she found herself after that. And I've often wondered. But that's a mess, when you're homeless and living in your car and depending on the handouts of strangers, and you're freezing in the winter, and especially if you don't have gas for your car, and if you're, it's that's a horrible way to live. I also mentioned a few videos ago about a young man I know, um, who is living in his mom's basement, having what in olden times we would have called a nervous breakdown. Um, and I don't know all the causes of it. I don't know if it's mental illness. I don't know if it's um, life events that he just hasn't been taught to or knows how to cope with. I don't know if it's drugs or addiction, or a combination of any of those. I don't know what it is. I just know that for several years now, with brief respites, he's he's been unable to hold a job. He doesn't work. He lives in mom's basement, and he basically doesn't function. Simple as that. Doesn't function. Um, and that breaks my heart. And I asked, and I mentioned this before, I asked his mother, do you have a family doctor? Could he go to the family doctor? Could he get counseling? Could you help pay for counseling? Um, I mean, I didn't mention, but there are always, if there's addiction involved or whatever, there are 12-step programs that are available. I mean, there are things that can be done to help. Maybe medications are needed. Maybe counseling is needed. Like, I don't know. And she said, yes, he can have a family doctor and thus access to medication. He could have counseling, but he doesn't feel worthy, and that breaks my heart. But that is a mess. It it's a horrible mess of a young person's life, and it crosses all boundaries of his life. I mean, you can't have friends when you're just sitting in the basement, and you don't have friends really, and you don't have purpose, and you don't have hope, and you don't have anything that's really happy. And if you're smoking grass to make yourself feel better for a while, or drinking alcohol, even if it's not to addictive levels, um, it's not helping to get better, and just sitting there is not going to help to get better. There are other messes, though, that may be also very severe but don't show as much on the outside. Um, I knew a woman once who years ago, who was the executor of her parents' estate. She had a sister who lived abroad, and she was the executor of her parents' estate. And her father died, and then her mother died, and they were immigrants, and they had investments, and they had saved very diligently, and they had lots of guaranteed income certificates. So all very safe investments that would roll over and would accrue interest. They had a fair amount of money, and this woman, my friend, then um, wasn't able to deal with it for whatever reason. She just let it go. She didn't do anything about it, and her sister didn't press her, and she did nothing about it. And she did nothing about it for a few months, and then for a year, and then for 2 years, and then for 5 years, and then for 10 years, and then for 15 years. And I think last time I spoke to her, it was over 20 years since her parents had died, and she had not dealt with that. She had not done anything to do with their estate. She had not, um, I mean, they had been buried and so on, but there was nothing to do with their finances that had been wound up at all. And I think her sister was starting to press her about that. Very patient, her sister was, but her sister was starting to press her on that. And I don't know, because we've lost touch. Not because of that, but we lost touch, and I'm not sure what's happened in that regard. And I pray for her that she was able to get some help and get over that. Clearly, there was something going on more than just, a normal kind of amount of procrastination because she was afraid of the task or whatever. She did say to me once that as long as her parents' estate wasn't settled, then she felt that they weren't actually dead. So there's likely some psychological counseling necessary there. Um, but but again, it was a mess. Now, mind you, she carried on with her life. She did other things. In fact, she did. Sometimes I think she went and got out of the house and did things in order to not have to deal with this. Um, so that's another kind of a mess, and it became a real mess. I mean, she had legal obligations, and I don't know that they would ever result in any kind of legal action. But the longer it went on, the harder it got to trace things and to know where things were. And she would make sporadic attempts, and then she'd run it up against obstacles like money that had been in some account wasn't there anymore, and the account had been closed, and she didn't know where it had gone, and she would have to chase the bank for it. I mean, it just got more and more complex and harder in the years that went on to figure out what was going on. So, clearly she needed real professional help, both accounting help and maybe psychological help to deal with that issue, that mess. But it didn't, from the outside, it didn't look, if you didn't know her and didn't know what she was dealing with, it didn't look like she had any dysfunction in her life. But I'm not going to, those kinds of messes, all I can say about that is that no mess, no matter how little or no matter how big, gets better by being left. There might be the odd exception to that. But for the most part, messes don't get better from being left alone. They get worse. You leave the flour canister that drops on the floor and you don't clean it up, and then it gets sticking to the floor, and it's harder to clean up the next day. And if you do that for a long time, it could, I don't know, grow maggots or something. Messes just don't get better for being left. So you want to get at them as quickly as you can and deal with them as fast as you can. Now I'm going to talk really, though, not about those really enormous messes that get you into enormous trouble, because I think usually they only come about when things are left for a long period of time, left untreated for a long period of time. But when you get a mess in your life, let me think of a mess. Okay, so there was a time in my life with my husband. We were in Toronto. We kept a pretty tidy household, as I do now. Everything had a place for it. And then through a series of events, we got a bunch of stuff in the house that did not have it. We did not have a place for. My mother decided to remarry at 85, good for her, and she moved out to Vancouver, British Columbia to marry this guy that she had known before she knew my father, and she had been a widow for 17 years at that point. And that was all joyful, and she packed up her house and sold things and got rid of things, did a huge amount of work. Huge amount of work. But she packed up things she thought that I would want to keep, and she sent them to me, and there was a truckload of them. She sent me her fitness equipment, treadmill or a bicycle or something. I think it was a bicycle. She sent me my Brownie uniform from when I was 8 years old. She sent me my dad's army uniform from when he had been in the army in World War II. I didn't know what to do with that stuff. There was tons of stuff, and there were books, and there were boxes and boxes and boxes of things, and photo albums of hers and my dad's, and just enormous amounts of things. And we didn't have anywhere to put it really, and we needed to get at it. We put it down in the basement, which was also where my husband's various bands practiced. It was not really a finished basement. It wasn't a very pretty space. But down it went, along with unused furniture and odds and sods of life. And that was just a mess down there. It was really a mess. And then about that time, we were also, about that time, I was really under some stress about my mom leaving. I hadn't realized at the time how much it affected me, but I wasn't the most pleasant person to live with during those months and a year or so before she got married. When she got married, I think the worst fight of our married life was the night after her wedding, something like that. Not a good time. And I was happy for her, but I was also feeling quite abandoned, I think, and even though I was close to 60 years old. So basically, we were having some stress at home, and we were never about to break up. We had 2 periods in our married life that were stressful, and that was one of them. And in that time, we both got a bit sloppy about putting things away and about bringing things into the house and not finding a place for them. And so the upstairs started getting messy too. And I don't know if it was just that the mess downstairs, all that stuff that was downstairs, made it feel like it was a messy house, and so it could get messy upstairs when things were wrong. We didn't put the effort into cleaning. We're both a bit depressed, I think. And now the house never got to the point where you couldn't have people in. It never got that bad. It was just messy by our standards. Um, and I wish I remembered exactly how I dealt with it all. I know that ultimately, my husband died 2 years after my mother died. Oh yeah, and then my mother died, and then there were more things that came. So I think the mess in the basement got even bigger because then I got some furniture which didn't fit into the house particularly well and stuff, but I wanted to keep because it had sentimental value, and I got some other stuff and shipped it back from Vancouver. And so there was more mess in the house. We did ultimately get the mess in the things got better with our marriage, thankfully, because my husband died a few years after that. Um, a couple of years after my mother died. So 6 years after she got married, I guess. And we didn't have bad times through all of that. I don't get me wrong. We had improved. Then it kind of sunk down again, and then it improved again. But at any rate, we got ourselves straightened out, and we got the house straightened out. But the basement was still full of stuff. And then my husband died, and then there was all his stuff in the house, and a lot of, I mean, I didn't touch it for at least a year. I couldn't touch anything he had touched for at least a year, but there was just a mess. Ultimately, I, I got help. I called organizers, and they came in and they helped me with the basement stuff. What I mostly needed help with wasn't making the decisions. It was what to do with the stuff. It wasn't, I want to get rid of this. It was, now what do I do with it? And if it's not to just go in the trash, where does it go? And how do I get it there? And how do I sell it if it has to be sold? Or where do I take it for donations? And they did all of that. They just took everything away and dealt with it. Um, I think that's what the 1-800 got junk kind of people do as well. So this was more an organizer who helped me make decisions about things. We went through things together, but and she brought in helpers and they organized things, and then I could just look at a pile of stuff and say keep, no, 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 and I didn't keep very much of it, and so I did ultimately get rid of a whole bunch of it. So that's an example. I guess what I would say about messes in that case, uh, if you have a mess, is take action. Absolutely take action. Don't just let it sit. And what action do you take? Well, I'm a believer in taking as many actions as you can think about. I'm not a believer in just taking one and just seeing if that one will be enough. I think take as many actions as you think about. Ask a friend to come and help you. Get an app on your phone. I just looked up apps, and there are apps, all kinds of apps for all kinds of conditions, for all kinds of habits, for all kinds of cleanups. That will help you with daily reminders. I have mentioned Fly Lady in the past, and I'm not endorsing that particularly. I used Fly Lady at one point because I signed up because I was very interested in the system she had and how she had an internet business out of it. But I thought it would also help a couple of people in my life who had trouble keeping their homes in order, and I used it for some things, but given that I had always had a cleaning lady and I kept things in order, I didn't need it too much myself, but except for that period of time. So, um, but I'm a big believer in scattershot when it comes to this. Try this, try that, try the other thing. Talk to a friend about it. Tell her or him the troubles you're having dealing with it. Ask a friend to help you. Hire someone to do something. Get some counseling if it feels like a bigger problem. Um, uh, put an app on your phone. Track. Make a daily list of things to do. Things to do really help, and break it down to really, really small things. 15-minute tasks, 10-minute tasks, and just do a 10-minute task every day. It can help. It gets you started. Um, it might be just to make one phone call or two phone calls. The other thing that helps, As I think someone said, if you have to eat a frog, do it before breakfast. Um, if you have something hard to do in a day, if you do it earlier in the day, you're better off. If it's a phone call you've been dreading to make it earlier in the day rather than later. Don't just put it off all day, letting it sit. Um, if you have to have an uncomfortable conversation with someone, make it, it might not be first thing in the morning, but mid morning or something, rather than waiting all day knowing you have to have that conversation today. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can't choose the time. You can't got to wait for your husband to get home or whatever to have the uncomfortable conversation. Um, and I'm not talking too much here about relationship messes. I can talk about those in another time, although I think the same general principles apply. If you have to make amends, if you need to deal with a relationship mess, sooner you do it, the better. Things fester over time, and they grow worse over time if they're left undealt with. Same thing for your own psychological issues. If you've got resentments or anger or hurt, those things need to be processed more immediately rather than stuffing them down and not dealing with them. Um, so take action, take whatever action you can, use whatever help you can find, use whatever help. If you've got financial issues, there are um, nonprofit organizations that help you uh, to deal with issues. You can look on the internet, you can get YouTube videos about things. And there's an amazing amount of help now available on the internet about almost anything. So, whatever it is, whether it's a small mess or a big mess, consider it like a little project and say, what's the next right thing I need to do what's the next action I need to take to deal with it? Take an action and then think of another action and then another action and do as many actions as you can in any period of time. Don't just take an action and hope that resolves it all. Take more and more and more actions until you can get that mess back into at least a state of disorder and maybe actually get it to resolve. So I'm wishing you well in dealing with any messes in your life. You can use this chart or a chart similar to that. It's easy to draw. I'm not going to draw it for you. You can see mine isn't very fancy at all. And you can use it to mark any places where you have messes that you want to clean up and work toward getting those better. And until then, so if you like this, if it was helpful, like, subscribe, um, take a look at some of my other videos. They're all about how to create a happy and successful and fulfilling life. And they're all based on my experience of over 80 years now of living and loving and laughing and sometimes having messes. So take care until the next time.